Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 3. The Entered Apprentice degree continued from Symbolism of the Three Degrees by Oliver Day Street, Part 1, The Entered Apprentice. Name of the Fraternity. Undoubtedly, the very name of Masonry is symbolic. The likening of the development of human character to the building of a house is an old simile. It was certainly in use among the Jews as early as the time of David, 2 Samuel 7:27, Psalms 118:22, and was a figure of speech with Jesus. It should, therefore, come no surprise that a society whose professed mission is character building should bear symbolically the name of the occupation of those engaged in the building of houses. It might be asked, why are we not called free carpenters instead of Freemasons, if we get our name from house builders? The answer is that we might have been so called had our fraternity originated in America instead of Europe or Asia. Carpenters are a much more important factor in house building here than in the old world. There nearly everything is and has for centuries been built of stone or brick. This is still more the case in Palestine where, according to our traditions, the Society of Freemasons had its origin. There, because of the scarcity of timber, the occupation of a mason was always of much greater consequence than that of the carpenter. Besides, it will be borne in mind that the more important edifices of all countries have, since the beginning of historic times, been built of stone or marble. In the ceremonies of making a mason, we do not attempt to do more than to indicate the pathway to Masonic knowledge. To lay the foundation for the Masonic edifice, the brother must pursue the journey or complete the structure for himself by reading and reflection. Brother Pike thus expresses this idea. Science makes use of symbols, but for its transmission, language is also indispensable. Wherefore the sages must sometimes speak, but when they speak, they do so not to disclose or to explain, but to lead others to seek for and find the truth of science and the means of the symbols. There must be somewhere in Freemasonry a consistent plan running entirely through it, by which all that is genuine in it may be rationally explained. It cannot be that a miscellaneous collection of rules, customs, symbols, and moral precepts, however valuable in and of themselves, thrown together without order or design, could have attracted the attention among intelligent men that Freemasonry has done in all ages in which it is known. Surely unity must somewhere exist in the great verity which we find in the Masonic system. A little study will reveal to us that the great, vital underlying idea sought to be inculcated by the several degrees considered collectively and which runs entirely through the system is to give an allegorical or symbolical representation of human existence, not only here but hereafter, and to point to the way which leads to the greatest good both in this life and in the life to come. Our ceremonies and symbols, while beautiful and impressive in and of themselves, and incidentally teaching valuable lessons of religion, morality, and industry, all cluster around and contribute to this central idea. But it is only when we reflect upon them in reflection to this sublime allegory of human life that we are enabled to comprehend them in the fullness of their beauty and grandeur. The Masonic student, therefore, who has never caught this conception of his subject, has failed to grasp Freemasonry in its most instructive and important aspect. Endeavor, therefore, to get clearly in your minds the point we emphasize and which we shall attempt to demonstrate, namely, that every sign, every symbol, and every ceremony in the first degree, in addition to any primary signification it may have, is also designed to illustrate allegorically some moral phase of human existence. The great German poet Goethe says, "The Mason's ways are a type of existence, and his persistence is as the days are of men in this world." We have dwelt at length on this thought just because it is not otherwise possible adequately to explain any part of the Masonic system. Definition of Masonry. A more beautiful, a more accurate, or a more comprehensive definition of Masonry never has and never will be given in so few words than that it is a system of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. It is truly a system. It is not a mere hodgepodge of rules, maxims, and precepts thrown together without order or design as ignorant Masons so often suppose. It is a system of morality, the word morality in the first and broadest sense, the doctrine of the right and wrong in human conduct. Standard Dictionary covers the whole field. It is veiled in allegory. Rightly understood, the whole system is an elaborate allegory of human life. An allegory, as already stated, is a departure from the direct mode of speaking in which the real subject is not mentioned by name, but is more or less thinly veiled, though not hidden beneath figures of speech. It is illustrated by symbols. What might otherwise be unintelligible in the allegory is made plain by the symbols accompanying it. The meanings of most of these symbols, though sometimes forgotten and hence not observed, may be ascertained by study and reflection. In our view, two other facts may be regarded as setting a limit in a loose sort of way to the meaning of Masonic symbols. One is that Masonry is derived from an operative society. The other that these symbols are obviously designed to teach moral and religious truths. We must conclude, therefore, that our ancient brethren, they meant and were designed to teach moral and religious truths of the need of which they were conscious. These are such only as would appeal to a man of practical common sense. It is folly to talk of these symbols meaning the same to them that they have meant at times to societies of philosophers and mystics. These additional meanings may be just as true and legitimate, but they are not Masonic meanings. The rule we have just laid down is general enough to admit of opinions different enough as to any symbol. Reliance must at last be placed largely upon a liberal measure of common sense. One fact is undoubted, and that is that speculative Freemasonry is a development from the operative Masons Guild of former times. But when this change began, or when it became complete, are points of controversy. When we come to consider the time and manner, when and how the separation occurred, there is a great uncertainty. Without attempting to state the evidence on which the conclusion is based, it is generally agreed that certainly, as early as AD 1600, speculative Masonry was in existence, though still maintaining a sort of connection with the operative craft. Just what this connection then was is not precisely known. The complete divorcement of speculative from operative Masonry, according to the most reliable authorities, seems to have taken place a few years prior to AD 1717. Just here a whole troop of questions begin to press for answer. Whence did the speculative Masons derive their esoteric, symbolical, and philosophical teachings? If not from the operative guilds, if from them, whence and when, and how did they in their turn obtain them? And our understanding of the meanings of the Masonic symbols must in measure wait the answering of these questions. Our present knowledge is not sufficient to enable us to answer them. Brother Gould has said that the one great and pressing duty of Freemasonry was, he thought, to try and recover the lost meanings of many Masonic symbols. And to do this effectively, it would be desirable to ascertain whether the symbolism they possessed became theirs by inheritance or was the accidental product of adoption or assimilation. If this symbolism was inherited, then the analogous customs of remote antiquity should form the subject of their study and investigation. But if on the contrary, it was introduced at a comparatively recent date into Freemasonry, then the way it was actually understood by those who introduced it ought to have the first claim upon their attention. Initiation. Initiation is now, as it has been for countless ages, employed as a symbol of the birth and endless development of the human mind and soul. The entered apprentice degree represents birth and the preparatory stage of life. Or in other words, youth. The fellow craft represents the constructive stage or manhood. The Master Mason represents the reflective stage or old age, death, the resurrection, and the everlasting life. This explanation of the 3 degrees is briefly given in our lecture on the 3 steps delineated on the Master's carpet. The Lodge. Likewise, the Lodge, which is sometimes defined as the place where Masons work, symbolizes the world or the place where all men work. Is it true that the Lodge symbolically represents the world? We might say to begin with that some have thought the word Lodge derived from the Sanskrit loga, meaning the world. However this may be, our monitors tell us that the form of a lodge is an oblong square, from east to west and between north and south, from earth to heaven, and from surface to center. This, of course, if it means anything, can mean nothing less than the entire known habitable earth, and Masonic scholars universally so interpreted it. This meaning was more manifest at the period when Freemasonry is supposed to have had its origin, for the then known world lying around the shores of the Mediterranean Sea was literally of the form of an oblong square. One doubting this may consult any map of the ancient world, especially that of Cosmas Indocoplastes of the 6th century, or that of Strabo AD 18. Dudley in his Noology, page 7, says that the idea that the earth was a level surface and of a square form may be justly supposed to have prevailed generally in the early stages of the world. It is certain that down to a comparatively recent date, it was believed that beyond a certain limit northward, life was impossible because of the darkness and cold, and likewise that beyond a certain limit southward, it was impossible because of the blinding glare and intense heat of the sun. It was even supposed that in the far south, the earth was yet molten. The biblical ideal was that the earth was square. Isaiah 11:12 speaks of gathering the dispersed of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. And in the Apocalypse 29 is the vision of 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth. So thoroughly grounded were these beliefs that in ancient times the square, now the recognized symbol of the lodge, was the recognized symbol of the earth, as the circle was of the sun. In this antiquated expression, oblong square, we therefore have not only an apt description of the ancient world and evidence that the lodge is symbolical thereof, but also a remarkable evidence of the great age of Freemasonry. It tends strongly to date our institution back to the time when the human mind conceived the earth to be a plane surface and was ignorant of its spherical character. Again, the covering of the lodge is said to be a clouded canopy or starry-decked heaven, a description that could not have the slightest application to anything else but the world. If the lodge symbolizes the world and the Mason symbolizes man, it follows that initiation must symbolize the introduction of the individual into the world, or the birth of the child. It was so regarded in the ancient systems of initiation and is now so understood by Masonic scholars everywhere. It is the least important view to consider it merely as the method of admitting one to membership in a society. Preparation. The preparation of the candidate and the plight in which he is admitted and entered apprentice strikingly typifies the helpless, destitute, blind, and ignorant condition of the newly born babe. But initiation means more than this. By all the authorities, it is agreed to by a symbolical representation of the process by which not only the child has been brought into existence and educated into a scholarly and refined man, but that by which the race has been brought out of savagery and barbarianism into civilization. The state in which a candidate enters an entered apprentice lodge fittingly typifies the barbaric, not to say savage, state in which man originally moved when he knew not the use of metals, and out of which he has been brought to his present condition. It is precisely this that has led to the application of the term barbarian to the uninitiated. On this point, we quote Brother Albert Pike again. He says, and that preparation of the candidate which symbolizes the condition of the Aryan race, especially in its infancy. He represents the condition of the race when there were no manufacturers and the fabrics of the loom were unknown, when men dressed in the skins of animals, and when the heat made these a burden, were hardly clothed at all. He represents their blindness of ignorance, even of the most useful arts, and altogether of divine truths, and that in which the number 3 appears, the bonds in which they were held of their sensual appetites, their passions that were their masters, anger, revenge, hatred, and all the evil kindred of these, and their superstitious fears. The preparation of the candidate is also symbolical of that equality of all men, which is one of the fundamental doctrines of our society. He is stripped of everything that indicates any difference in fashion, station, or wealth. All evidences of artificial distinction are obliterated. The onlooker could not tell whether he is a prince or a pauper, a millionaire or a beggar. On the other hand, he is not deprived of any of those qualities of heart, mind, or character, which mark the real superiority of one man over another. From the very beginning of initiation, he is urged to make the utmost use of these in an effort to excel in all that is noble and worthy. A little study and reflection will show that every Masonic symbol has an apt application not only to the moral and intellectual life history of the individual, but also to that of the race considered collectively. Biologists tell us that this parallel between the individual and the race holds great in a material realm, and that in the physical growth and development of every child from the moment of its conception till it is a fully grown man, there is epitomized the history of the evolutionary development of the race through all the ages that have passed. However this may be, it is certain that an exact parallel does exist between the moral and intellectual growth of the child and the process which history indicates the race as a whole has passed through. Secrecy. One of the very first lessons taught the candidate and impressed upon him symbolically, and in an unforgettable manner, is the duty of secrecy. The secret signs, tokens, and words, which usually excite the greatest curiosity among the uninitiated, are in fact the least important parts of Freemasonry. All understand this who have ever passed through the solemn ceremony of being raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason. Still, they are not without their value. They are a protection against impostors. They are a passport to the attention and assistance of the initiated everywhere. They have stayed the uplifted hand of the destroyer. They have arrested the despoiler of female virtue. They have softened the asperities of the tyrant. They have subdued the rancor of the malevolent and broken down the barriers of political animosity and religious intolerance. But the chief value of this lesson lies in the fact that few persons are able to keep a secret. It is a priceless but rare virtue, and yet one where little effort is made to teach or practice it. If Masonry could do no more than train its membership to preserve sacredly, except where a higher duty commands disclosure, the secret of others confided to them, it would have done a great work, and one which alone would entitle it to a continued existence. The ancients so prized this virtue that they allotted a god to it. It is said of Aristotle that, when asked what thing appeared to him most difficult of performance, he replied, "To be secret and silent." I fear we moderns would more nearly deify the gossip. The ancient symbol of secrecy is a finger laid across the lips. The manner of the candidate's reception is symbolic of a violated conscience for any departure from those injunctions of secrecy and virtue laid upon them in the course of initiation. Rites similar to our own at this point were in vogue among the ancients. Cool symbols. One of the things first noticed in the entered apprentice degree and continued throughout all the degrees is the employment of the tools of the operative Mason as emblems of moral qualities. This peculiarity of Freemasonry is well known even to outsiders. Brother George Fleming Moore, former editor of The New Age and past Sovereign Grand Commander, Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, declares that it is clear that the ancient Chinese philosophers used our present Masonic symbols in almost precisely the same sense in which they are used by us in modern Freemasonry. The tools with which men labor are not inappropriate for use as moral symbols. They are neither humble nor trivial. They are worthless emblems of the highest and noblest virtues. Tools have performed an astonishing part in civilizing and enlightening mankind. They are one of the few things that distinctly mark man as immeasurably superior to the other animals. Some scientists have even contended that it is alone man's ability to fashion and use tools that have raised him above the level of the brute creation. But radical as this view must be, it cannot be denied by any thoughtful man that the use of tools has been one of the chief instrumentalities in all human progress. Not only material, but mental and spiritual. Without tools, we could not till the soil, or work the mines, or reduce the metal. We could enjoy only the rudest shelters, and all the creations of art which appeal to our spiritual natures would be impossible. The very stages of human advancement are named from the character of the tools that were employed during them, thus the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, etc. Some students suppose the first great achievement of man in his progress from savagery to civilization to have been the development of articulate speech. The second, the discovery of the uses of fire. The third, they believe to have been the invention of a tool, namely the bow and arrow. But doubtless this was preceded by the discovery of the use of the club, even if the club did not precede the development of speech, as has been the case with the great anthropoid apes. Pottery, another class of utensils, they hold to have been the fourth, the domestication of animals the fifth, and the discovery of the manufacture and use of iron the sixth. The seventh was the art of writing, which also involved the use of a tool. Thus we can see that 4, perhaps 5, speech-making strides of savage and barbaric man had to do with the use of tools. With civilized man, the case has ever been more striking. Among his early discoveries or inventions were gunpowder, the mariner's compass, the manufacture of paper, and printing with movable type. Another was the demonstration by Copernicus, 1530, that the earth revolves on an axis, and that the sun does not daily make a circuit around her. The steam engines, machines for weaving and spinning, apparatus for generating and utilizing the boundless possibilities of electricity, the gasoline engine and the flying machine are all advancements made possible by the invention and use of new tools. And it must be remembered that the discovery of Copernicus was rendered possible only through the use of another tool. To the psalmist, the heavens declare the glory of God's handiwork, but 1,000 times more solemnly and impressively do they now disclose it through the medium of the telescope. It was nothing less than an inspiration that prompted our ancient brethren to symbolize the tools which they produced these creations of art and architecture, whose sight caused our breasts to heave with the highest emotions of which we are capable. Professor Henry Smith Williams, after pointing out the many material advantages involved in the use of tools, says that we must not overlook the aesthetic influence of edged implements. And then what must be said of the tools that make our music? If there is a glimpse of heaven obtainable on earth, it is in the wonderful art made possible through our marvelous musical instruments. How our various working tools acquire the practical symbolical meaning we now attach to them, we do not always know. In some instances, we know that they have borne them for ages. At any rate, it is with peculiar fitness that the material tools, which contribute so essentially to the building and the beautifying of the material structure, should be made to symbolize those virtues which are so essential to the building and beautifying of human character. It is by the use of tools that the architect designs, erects, and adorns the building. So also is it that by the practice of moral, intellectual, and religious virtues, human character is perfected. In a system, therefore, where a perfect building is made to symbolize the perfect character, it is not surprising, but is altogether appropriate, that the tools which produce the one should symbolize the virtues which make the other. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.